Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Okay. Just to see if there was anybody out there. Hare Krishna. Okay. So there's a beautiful bhajan which was the favorite of Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati, which I usually like to sing before the Bhagavatam. I think if you have phones, or maybe I think you have the board here. It's called Sri Nama Kirtana, which is Jasomati Nandana. I think the board is here. Let's see, is that it? That's it, right? Yeah. Yasomati Nandana Brajapanagara Gokulandana Ahahana Gokulandana Yasomati Nandana Brajapanagara Gokulandana Ahahana Gopiparanandanam madhanam manoharam Gopiparanandanam madhanam manoharam Kalyanamona vidhaha Kalyanamona vidhaha Amala Harinam Amya Vilasaham Amala Harinam Amya Vilasaham Hikena Purandhara Navinanagara Vara Vamsi Vadhanasi Vahasa Hey! Oh, Brajadana Palana Sudakuhanasana Brajadana Palana Sudakuhanasana And Handa Gorana Rakuha Nanda Gorana Kuha Hey, Govinda Madhava, Navanita Taskal. Hey, Govinda Madhava, Navanita Taskal. Hey, Sundarananda Gopala. Sindharananda Gopal. Hey, oh, Jamuna Tatachara Gopi Vasanohara. Jamuna Tatachara Gopi Vasanohara. Gopi Vasanohara. Rasara Sikha Kripa Moya. Hey! Rasa Rasika Kripa Moya. Sri Radha Vallabha Vrindavana Nata Bhagari. Sri Radha Vallabha Vrindavana Nata Bhagari. Hey! Aham Bhakti Vinoda Swahaya. Hey! Shila Bhakti Vinoda Swahaya. Hey, Yasomati Nandana Bhajavaran Nagara Gokula Hara. Ha 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 ha. Gokula. Hey, Amala Harinam Namiyavi Asaham. Govinda Madhava Navarita Kaskaram. Jamuna Tatachara Gopi Vasanohara. Sri Radhavala Vrindavan Bhaktapara. Hey, oh, Ahari Bho, Ahari Bho, Ahari Bho, Ahari Bho. Hey, Thai Gaur Hari Bho, Hari Bho, Hari Bho, Thai Gaur Hari Bho. Yasomati Nandanam Brajabada Nagara Gokula Anjana. Brajabada Nagara Gokula Ranjana. His mother calls him. He doesn't come. Kana, beautiful name, Krishna. Okay, this is the Srimad Bhagavatam, 10th canto, 60th chapter. Krishna teases Rukmini, verse number 2. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Yastvaitam Lilaya Vishwam Srija Atyad Avatisvisa Srijatya Vati Ishvaraha. Sadhi jatam swasetunam Kopitaya yadushvajaha Yastvetal lilaya vishvam Srijati ati avastishvaraha Sahijata swasetunam Kopitaya yadushvajaha Yastveltal lilayad vishvam Srijati atya avistishvaraha Sahijata swasetunam Kopitaya yadushvajaha. Lights. You can shut them off. Yeah, we don't need them. Ladies? Anyone else? Ya, who, to, and, etat, this, lilaya, as his play, vishvam, universe, srinjati, sends forth, ati, devours, avati, protects, ishvaraha, the supreme controller, sa, he, indeed, jata, born, swa, his own, setunam, of the laws, kopitaya, for the protection, yadusu, among the yadus, ajaha, the unborn Lord. So this is Sri Badrayan. It's another name for Sukadeva Goswami, I believe. The unborn personality of Godhead, the supreme controller, who creates, maintains, and then devours this universe simply as his play, took birth among the Yadus to preserve his own laws. Purport by his disciples of his divine grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. As stated in the sixth canto of Srimad Bhagavatam 6.3.19, Dharmam tu shakshat Bhagavatam pranitam. Religion is the law established by God. The word setu means a boundary or limit, as in the case of a dike. Earth is raised up on both sides of a river or canal so that the water will not deviate from its proper path. Similarly, God establishes laws so that people who follow them can peacefully progress along the path back home, back to Godhead. These laws, which are meant to guide human behavior, are thus called setu. A further note on the word setu means earth that is raised up to separate agricultural fields or to form a causeway or bridge is also called setu. Thus, in the ninth canto of the Bhagavatam, uses the word setu to indicate the bridge Lord Ramachandra built to Sri Lanka. Since the laws of God act as a bridge to take us from the material life to liberated spiritual life, this additional sense of the word setu certainly enriches it as its use here. Omagyan timidandasya gnanjana salakaya chaksu unmilitam yena tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Iti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gaudavani Pacharine Nirvisesa Sunyavadi Pastyatya Desatarine Panchakalpa Tarubhischa Kripa Sindhu Bevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namaho Namaha. Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Sivasadi Gaur Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Dharmam tu shakshak bhagavani bhagavatam panitam. Religion is the law established by God. They say that there's different kinds of religion. And they quote different, what we call paths of faith. We say Hindu or Muslim or Jewish, Christian, and there are a number of other prominent paths. But these are not different. The point is that religion is one. Religion simply means to follow the laws of God. So if you follow the laws of God as a Christian, then you're a good follower. If you follow the laws of God as a Hare Krishna, then you are following properly. The laws are there in every, we say, tradition that springs up as a particular path by which people can follow a set of principles which are the foundation by which religion is executed, and that is called the rules and regulations. Call them vidhis and nishedas, things to do and things to avoid. As mentioned here, they keep us on the path. They give us the right direction by which we can proceed towards the goal. And what is the goal of religion? The goal of religion is Premupumarta Mahan, means to develop one's natural love for God. There's no second goal. Any other goal that may be established as authorized is an intermediate goal by which one can progress to ultimately the real goal, and that is to develop one's love for Krishna or God. But nowadays, people like to manufacture things. They like to create their own rules, regulations, laws, and consider them to be bona fide. But it's just like if you live in a particular country and there are laws that are established by the government in that country to guide the citizens in a particular way. And these laws are established as those things you follow, and if you don't, you break the law, you're considered a violator, and there's some punishment coming. But nowadays, people think that, just like using that example, well, I can make my own law, just like Prabhupada would always say. In America, it says keep to the right. But if you go to London, you keep to the left, or India, keep to the left. Australia, keep to the left. Most countries of the world are keep to the right, some are keep to the left. So you say, I like to drive on the right side no matter where I am. But you get arrested, or maybe you have an accident. If you do that in countries where keep to the left is the principle. So you can't make your own laws, you have to follow the laws of the authority. And in this case, the authority is the person who makes the laws. As there are laws, there's lawmakers too. You can't say laws are just manifestations of the material energy and they appear at a certain time, and that's what we follow. And therefore they come and go, and therefore we can just change the laws because they're also temporary. But then and that's another way of cheating. The one has to follow the principles is given and by the Supreme Person who is the establishment of the Lord. As Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Sarvasichaham Radhisani Visto, Mata Smita Jnanam Pohanam Cha Vedaischa Saham Aham Eva Vedyo Vedanta Krit Vedavid Eva Chaham. I am the compiler of the Vedas, Krishna says. I am the knower of the Vedas, and the Vedas are meant to know me. So the conclusion is that one follows the principles given by the Shastras and explained and also maybe adjusted according to time, place, and circumstance by the pure devotee spiritual master. And one can stay on the path of devotional service. Just like we have these simple rules. No illicit sex, no intoxication, no meat eating, and no gambling. So why? Why do we follow those? Because they're the pillars of sinful activities. So if we stay within the confines of obeying the restrictions, then we can actually execute the positive in a very, what we say, successful way. But it's just like sometimes I see devotees, they know what to do, but they don't know what not to do. We have a tendency to make mistakes and do the wrong thing, which sort of minimizes or dilutes the progress we make by doing the right things. So these two concepts of the rules are both important. Things to follow and things to not to do. Both of them are equally beneficial in the sense of bringing one closer to the Supreme Lord in devotional service. So that is the meaning of this statement. Dharma tu shakshak bhagavani panitam. That those laws cannot be changed. Prabhupada was talking about that. Just like the Vedas are divided into two aspects. One is called Shruti, one is called Smriti. Shruti are actually the essence of the Vedas, the four Vedas along with the Upanishads. These are the Vedas. And then you have the Puranas, and you have the Itihasas, you have the Dharma Shastras also, many different aspects of the Vedas. But these are known as Smriti. So what is Smriti? Smriti means the commentaries on the Shruti according to the Acharya's time, place, and circumstance. So that's not a change, that's just an illustration of how they apply accordingly. It's like when Prabhupada came to the West, he knew he couldn't establish Krishna consciousness the same way it is established in India, because the climate and the culture of the Western mentality was much different. And he knew it was so set within that way that to change it would be impossible. So therefore he adopted certain things. For instance, he in India, generally within the temples, the men run all of the temples and the women come from the outside. They live outside, they take part in the activities, but they don't live within the ashrams. And maybe there are women's ashrams, but they're separate from the temples. But Prabhupada knew to try to do that in America would be impossible, and it would be a revolution. So he understood, well, of course, he understood the principle that the spirit soul is equal in both man and women, so both should give complete opportunities, or what we say, same opportunities to engage in devotional service. And Prabhupada was criticized for that. He's criticized for that and for making that adjustment. But the criticism, Prabhupada used to say, but I have become successful because of that. I have become successful. So he knew how to deal with the cultural climate in such a way that he adopted a principle that was not normally followed from the tradition, but somehow or other was successful. But only an acharya can do that. So someone thinks, well, I have to adjust things also because I don't like the way it goes. Or I think it'll go better if I do it this way. Then that won't work because one has to be authorized to do that. And therefore, only one who is the acharya can do that, no one else. Acharya means one who comes into succession from Krishna ultimately. And they understand the scriptures, they practice that understanding in their own devotion, and they can adjust things only within the realm of practice. They don't change the philosophy. That's one they don't change. Sometimes people like to change the philosophy too to make it sound a little bit more pleasing. Sometimes some of the words of the philosophical teachings are a little strong, especially for the Western mentality. So they think, well, maybe we should change it to make it more palatable, more easily understandable. There is a room for that, but separate. You can't do it within the revealed scriptures. You can write books on that, which illustrate the same principles, but using language that maybe is more easily understood and more easily applicable. Because if you read the Vedas, you'll get confused. The Vedas are even the Vedavadaratas, those who are expert in the Vedas, they have a difficult time understanding the Vedas. Therefore, that's why the Vedas are divided into Shruti and Smriti. What is Bhagavad Gita? Bhagavad Gita is not Shruti, it's Smriti. Krishna is speaking on the principles of the Vedas and giving us the understanding in a language that is applicable to time, place, and circumstance. And so therefore even Bhagavad Gita is not Shruti, it's Smriti. Smritis cannot be changed, but they're adjusted by time, place, and circumstance, and only by the acharyas. So therefore, the rules and regulations and restrictions and the process itself always remains intact. But there is a different angle of vision. Just like you can see a mountain from one side, you can look at it from another side, you can look at it from another side. It looks different, but it's the same mountain. It's the same mountain. So, as it's explained here, only the Lord, He is the establisher of religious principles. And therefore, we have to follow whatever Krishna says, or whatever the pure devotee who is representing Krishna says. We cannot just make up our own ideas, rules, regulations, and changes. And sometimes you see that people who have great philosophical acumens, they have ability to understand philosophy, they like to adjust things within the actual text itself. But that becomes an opera or becomes a deviation. Because just like what do we sing? Brindayai Tulsi Devai Priyayai Kesavastachar Vishnu Bhakti Pradidevi Sachavachai Namaho Namaha. So we all know she's Krishna Bhakti, right? But Prabhupada said you can't change the language in the scriptures. In the scriptures, it's written that way, Vishnu Bhakti. So although we know that she is Krishna Bhakti, it's still the scriptures giving us an understanding that this is how it's explained. So we have to follow the Vedic mantras and not adjust the mantras according to what we think is more appropriate or more exact to the philosophical teachings. So this understanding has to be clear because there are those who like to change things. Change, change, change. Do something new. But what is actually religious principles? And they're eternal. The religious principles are eternal. Of course, there are some temporary religious principles that applies to certain activities, but ultimately, religious principles, as far as the execution of the process of pure devotional service, they're eternal. And so, those principles they remain intact in every particular circumstance. So that one has to understand that and not try to adjust things to make it seem to be more suitable, like when well, this is not a religious principle, but it's an instructions of the spiritual master. We had the problem in New York Temple many years ago when a group of the sannyasis and some of the leading men there thought the women should not chant japa in the temple. They can chant in another room in the building, or they can chant outside. And then they start moving the women from the front to the back. This idea of women standing in the back is not Prabhupada's idea. So the women can stand all the way up on the front on the one side and the men on the other. But these sannyasis thought, well, it's not good for the brahmacharis. So, let's restrict the women to a more safer place for us. When Prabhupada found out about that, he was quite upset. And he said, if the brahmacharis are agitated, they can go to the forest. They can go to the forest. So, and he said, then they have no problems. There's nothing there they can be bothered with. Maybe. So there were so many ideas. And then they said, well, women can't go on the altar. That was another thing that they adjusted. And Prabhupada found out about that, and then he changed it back. That went on for a long time because Prabhupada didn't find out about it right away. And that was happening for actually for a couple of years till Prabhupada became aware of it. So these are just basic protocols. But then again, changing, just like changing some of the statements in Prabhupada's books, became very fashionable to bring it closer to the meaning. But it says you can't change the words of the Acharya. And even when Prabhupada was here, they were changing in his words. He said, Prabhupada would say, what are they doing? Why are they changing? And then Prabhupada, one day given a class, and then they were giving the word for word translation. And it had, the word was, let me see, what was the word? Goraksha. So they put down cattle raising for Goraksha in the book. Cattle raising. Prabhupada said, what is this cattle raising? Cow protection. So, sometimes in order to patronize the particular atmosphere, social, political atmosphere, they want to adjust things so make it more understandable to Prabhupada. But it says, especially posthumously, one can never change the words of the acharyas because that becomes an aparad, that's an offense. So these are just examples of how the laws Dharma Shaktu Shaksha Bhagavatam Pranitam are given by the Lord or by his pure devotee. Only they can actually teach the principles of religion. So whether you follow the laws given by Krishna directly, or you follow the laws given by Krishna through his pure devotee, which is also direct, it's the same. It's the same. Like that. And here there's a nice example, the word Setu. There's a place in South India called Setu Banda, where it's the place where the bridge was made, where when the monkey soldiers had to cross the ocean and they needed a way to cross, and Ramchandra was there, and so they decided to build a bridge. And they were throwing rocks into the water, but they were writing the name of Ram on the rocks. And because of that, although these big boulders were floating, big boulders don't float, they go down. But because of the power of the Lord's name, the boulders were floating, and then they made this bridge all the way across 800 miles across the ocean. 88 miles wide and 800 miles long. So that's called a bridge or a guide or a setu. So here it's an interesting that the laws of God are also called setu because they are the bridge by which we follow the path going back home, back to Godhead. So I remember in New Vrindavan it was fashionable to change things to make it apparently more westernized. But also it got to the point of changing things that were foundational. Now there's two things. There's a principle and there's a detail. Principles can never be changed. Just like it says, the Acharya has established that in order to qualify for initiation, one has to chant 16 rounds and follow the 4 regulative principles. That's a principle. And a detail is, well, you could chant those 16 rounds throughout the day. Of course, if you chant them in the morning, it's the most, but it's not like it's fixed. You have to chant only in the morning. So that's a detail. So one time, Shrutikirti, Srila Prabhupada's servant, asked him, well, Prabhupada's saying you can't change principles, but you can change these details. And the question was, how do you know the difference? How do you know the difference between a principle and a detail? And then Prabhupada's answer was, that requires intelligence. That's all. That's the whole answer. That means not everyone may not be able to understand the distinction, but one should get that intelligence or hear from those who know, and then one can understand. Because there are details, Just like in India, certain rules and regulations are applied, but in the West it's not applied. So because of the culture and the tradition and the principles. But these are details. But when it comes to a principle, I remember in New Vrindavan we had the idea that you didn't have to chant 16 rounds, you have to chant 2 hours. So the estimation was usually you can finish 16 rounds in 2 hours. So it was a time chanting program, not a numerical chant. So that went on, but not everyone was able to do 16 rounds in 2 hours, and some people could do it in less than 2 hours. So that was a principle that got adjusted, and ultimately things started to become a little less spiritually powerful, and then things started to fall apart because there was a lot of changes of the principles. Can't change the principles yet, and then you have to know what is the principle and what is the detail. And they're all there in the scriptures. They're given by the spiritual master. They're given by the pure devotee. They're given by the Lord himself. So one should hear regularly from this process of hearing, Sranvata Swakata Krishna Punya Shravana Kirtanaha, Ridyantosto Apadrani Vidyanoti Suhet Satam. One has to hear regularly. And by hearing regularly, then Krishna within the heart purifies the devotee and gradually brings them closer and closer to the stage of pure devotional service. So this process of hearing is very important. In fact, it's the foundation. Out of all of the 9 processes of devotional service, hearing accompanies all of the other 8. The most important principle is chanting. As Prabhupada said, you have to chant Hare Krishna. That one's not optional. But then again, there are hearing, remembering, chanting, worshiping, praying, serving the lotus feet, becoming a friend, and ultimately surrendering everything. These are the 9 processes. But before you can do any one of them, you have to have an understanding of how to do it, or what is the process by which one performs that activity. And therefore the process of hearing is important, because they're also adjusted according to time, place, and circumstance as far as how they apply. We have to hear. And that means we have to read these books every day, not just when we have time. We have to hear every day, because then we get nourishment, just like we sing, Guru Mukha Padma Vakya Chitete Koriya Oikya. This Guru Mukha Padma Vakya, the words of the spiritual master, are my nourishment. They're my food. We get food, we get nourishment on the bodily and mentally level from food, air, and various types of healthy living. But then again, what is the spiritual nourishment? Hearing from the spiritual master, hearing from the scriptures, and not only hearing, but understanding. Not only understanding, but trying to apply that knowledge in practice. Then the knowledge becomes complete. So therefore, it's a whole process. But the more you hear, the more you understand. The more you understand, the more it's easier for you to understand how to apply. And the application is also given along with the process of practice, how they apply. But then again, individuals are different, and therefore the application might be slightly different for each and every individual, but the principles are the same, that the knowledge can never be adjusted but applied accordingly. So one has to hear regularly, because by hearing regularly, we have Sukadev Goswami. He was chanting and Maharaj Parikshit heard. Parikshit heard for 7 full days. And after 7 days, he was fully Krishna conscious simply by the process of hearing, because he heard in a certain way. There is different ways to hear. If your mind is wandering on different subject matters, while the sound vibration is being given, you're not really connecting with the sound. Sometimes we do that when we chant Hare Krishna. We're chanting and the sound is coming out, but our minds are somewhere else. So although there is some sound coming in, we're not actually connecting with the essence of the heart and the name. We have to hear with attention. And attention has to be applied. It's not just something that's in the air and it'll happen. You have to force your mind to hear. You have to force your mind to listen, both in the reading process and in the hearing process. Because the mind is what? Chanchala. Goes everywhere and anywhere. That's its nature. And therefore, in the Padma Purana, it explains there is a series of principles that make up the process of successful hearing. And then you can test yourself whether you're hearing or not based on these principles. And the first one is faith in the person who is speaking. In other words, the words are authorized. In other words, those you should hear from only authorized sources. And then you can accept that this is whatever is being said is truth. The second thing is humility. And that is not to filter the sound vibration through our own ideas. Try to hear in a way of absorbing rather than trying to, I guess the way to be was try to compare it to other things. And the third thing is, and this is the most important, destroying the faults of the mind. And that means wherever the mind wanders, bring it back to the sound. The mind will wander. It's just the nature of the mind. It goes here, it goes there, it goes to India, it goes to, it goes to Vrindavan in India, it goes to the grocery store, goes to what I have to do later on today, goes to what happened yesterday that I didn't like, it goes to everything. This is the way the mind goes. But by forcing the mind to hear the sound vibration gradually, I had that experience on the plane just when I was coming over to America. I was on the plane and I was listening to Prabhupada. But I noticed I wasn't really fully connected to the sound, so I forced my mind to listen. And I just kept listening. And after some time, it became so nice and everything became so clear that I didn't want to stop the process of hearing. It was just so powerful. When you force your mind into that context or into that avenue of Shravanam, after a while you're actually getting realizations from what you hear. And that's the fourth part of these four things, is that if you're actually hearing, you'll get two things. You'll get realizations on what you hear, or you'll get questions. One of the two. So if you're getting realizations, that means you understood and you accept. That means yes, that's correct. I understand that. It's more like the experience of eating. Eating is an experience. If you sit there and read the menu and you think, wow, I ate. What kind of eating is that? You have to actually, take the food. And then it has a certain effect on you. So in the same way, when we're actually hearing and we get realizations, it has an effect. It changes our consciousness or elevates our consciousness. And the second thing is, even if realizations don't come, there should be questions in order to get clarifications and understanding, so we can go deeper into them, or we can get a clear understanding of what the knowledge is and how it applies to us. There are knowledge that is general, but then the application comes in the form of understanding by asking questions. So when we ask questions, then everything becomes clear. So this is the process of hearing. And Prabhupada writes in the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, I want you to hear with rapt attention. But then he says, you can't hear with rapt attention unless you're pure in mind. And you can't be pure in mind unless you're pure in activity, action. And you can't be pure in activity unless you're pure in eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. In other words, regulating the four bodily activities. And then he says, but then he goes on to say, somehow try to hear. In other words, even if you haven't got to that stage of pure consciousness, make that effort to hear, because it's the foundation by which one gets all knowledge and realization, everything becomes clear. It's just like, how many times have we heard, you're not this body? I mean, we hear it over and over in the scriptures, it comes in the lectures, when you're not this body. That's a certain type of hearing. But then, if you hear it with complete attention and your mind is in an absorbing mood, then you realize that, yes, I'm not this body. It becomes a realization as opposed to just picking up the sound vibration. So that's the difference between Gyan and Vigyan, knowledge and understanding, or realized knowledge like that. So we're meant to come to that platform of realization, because only on the platform of realization can you understand Krishna, or you understand the process of devotional service. So practice this hearing process as much as you can, and you'll see things become easy and more clear in how to practice devotional service in the most effective and the most successful way. In other words, you're making progress. Okay, so can't see the clock. 8:28. I think I'm supposed to stop by 8:30, right? Any questions, comments? We have two questions, one here and one there, three. Okay.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, thank you so much for the class. I thought of two questions, but I'm going to ask this one first. Prabhupada gave us very clear instructions on principles for the temple. And as you mentioned, sometimes we see how things start to move away from those very clear instructions, and then difficulties obviously manifest. How we as a community, as a community of devotees, can come back to those principles of establishing those clear guidelines that Srila Prabhupada gave us for how a temple should function, the activities of the temple, and even as a temple residents and temple devotees.
Yeah. So if it's clear, then all you do is follow. But if it's clear, but at the same time there are so many extenuating circumstances or changes that happened since that time that happened, then you have to understand, how does it apply? And that requires honesty or purity. Purity means that I want to follow the process exactly as the process is giving. That's purity. Purity means I don't add or anything to it. I don't take away anything to it. So if one is serious to follow the process, one should understand it, read it, understand it, and if it's not clear, or if there's some other considerations that make it unclear, that requires some discussions. Because just like, I'll give you an example. I was at a North American temple presidents meeting many years ago. We were in Towako, in New Jersey. This was, really long time ago, maybe 20 years ago. So Prabhupada had said that the profits from the book distribution, half of those profits that are made in America should go to support the temples in India. And Prabhupada said that. That was when Prabhupada was here, because book distribution was really strong in America in those days. Now, fast forward to the year 2000, I think it was around that time. The temples in India were starting to flourish, and America was going down. So then the question came, should we still give half of the profits of the book distribution that was made in America to support the temples in India? And they were still doing it. And then the answer was no, because obviously things changed. So then they stopped that like that. So that was an obvious and an honest and a very intelligent way to understand. The temples in America are going down. Temples in India are starting to flourish. Why cut away the American funds when they need it here more than they do in India? So things just changed. So some people might say, well, you broke Prabhupada's instructions. No, the situation changed. So that was a practical thing. And then there are the philosophical teachings, those don't change. But they also require understanding and how to apply those things. So if it's clear, then there's no question. You simply go ahead and execute it the way it's given. If it's not clear, then with a group of senior devotees who are committed to the upkeep of the temple, then there should be some discussion on how to understand these things in the light of the present situation. That's why Prabhupada said this movement, when Prabhupada was in, I forget where he was, but it was the middle of the night. Prabhupada had been doing his translations. So Prabhupada, if he needed his servant usually slept outside the door where Prabhupada was. And if Prabhupada needed him, Prabhupada would ring his bell, and then the servant would wake up. But this time the servant was Giriraj, Giriraj Brahmachari at the time. And so he came in, paid his obeisances to Srila Prabhupada, and Prabhupada was in a very thoughtful mood. He said, how will this movement go on after I'm gone? He posed that question. And Giriraj was saying, well, we'll chant our rounds every day. We'll go to Mangal Arti. We'll go out and distribute books. But that's not what Prabhupada was wanting to hear. He wanted to hear a principle and not so much an activity. So Prabhupada gave the principle. He said, this movement will go on by organization and intelligence. By organization and intelligence. So he said, we are highly organized, and therefore it requires intelligence on how to organize in the best possible way, and how to apply and how to, adjust whenever the situation is required. That requires intelligence, and intelligence should be fueled or supported by purity. In other words, honesty, that one wants to do what Srila Prabhupada has given us, and not simply interjecting their own ideas because it has some benefit for me. So some of the instructions may be easily applicable, and others may require some austerity. But in either case, they have to be executed. That's the point. So I think organization and intelligence is the answer. But then again, those who know, they're persons who are in that position of leadership, they're expected to give organization and they're expected to give guidance, which is the intelligence by which the organization is formulated and will work. So I can't give you a straight answer. Yeah, not everything is so easy. Yeah, Hare Krishna. What's your name?
Hare Krishna, my name is Donovan.
Da-
Donovan.
Donovan?
Yeah.
Okay.
Our founder, Acharya, is there now or potentially in the future someone we can look to as an Acharya in this day and age or near future?
Prabhupada is the founder acharya for all times, all places, and all devotees. He has established the principles and the process, and everything is there in his books. He said, my books will be the law books for the next 10,000 years. So his duly represented disciples who have taken the responsibility of the same activity that he's done. In other words, the gurus in our movement are meant to be what we say, what's the word? Transparent via medias to Srila Prabhupada. They're meant to give us Srila Prabhupada. So we're getting Srila Prabhupada through them, but we're not getting something different. So we don't need anything new or another person to come in and somehow or other adjust things, because then everything will be, people become confused, and then there will simply be factions. Everything there is in Prabhupada's books. If you want to know this movement, read his books. He says they're in my books. His lectures are also good, but the books are solid. The lectures also sometimes apply to certain principles of time and place. The books you can use as an eternal application for all of the practice of devotional service. So, and those who represent Srila Prabhupada, the gurus in the movement, are meant to be mediums by which we can give Srila Prabhupada to others. So we don't need anybody else. We simply need the process by which we can understand Prabhupada more and more. And so everything is there. Okay? Does that make sense?
Yes, Maharaj.
Okay.
महाराज धन्यवाद धन्यवाद थैंक यू that's a verse bahunam janmante jnanavan mam prapadyanti after many lives one who see knowledge is understood to me such a personality is very rare then it says sarvadharman parityajya mam ekam sharanam vraja even surrender to me so that's the stage of sannyas like
That's surrender.
yeah surrender
Complete surrender.
so in this verse especially Rukmini Lord Krishna is teasing Rukmini.
Yeah, that's coming up.
Yeah. Yeah, but the title is Lord Krishna teases Rukmini. So when in childhood our consciousness is pure, like so when we grow our consciousness become impure. So generally the teasing attitude in material world is prominent, like that's called Eve teasing. In other words,
Say that again.
Lord Krishna is teasing Rukmini
Right.
in this chapter. The title is that. In this material world, it's in a perverted reflection. It's Eve teasing, like teasing opposite. male or
Yeah.
female, whatever.
Yeah, but his teasing has a meaning to it. He's doing it for a certain reason.
Yeah. So in childhood, our consciousness is pure. As we grow, our consciousness becomes pure. Yes.
Well, yeah, then we start to think we know something.
Yeah. So my mother taught me in like you stay away from opposite this. Like I was shy in a sense. So, but we can we in then we as we grow up we bewildered because we have four defects. Conditioned souls has four defects.
Right.
So one is to commit mistakes, the sense enjoyment, and but we trap the mode of passion and mode of ignorance very prominent.
Yeah, the cheating propensity is there too.
Yeah, so mode of passion and mode of ignorance very prominent. So that means we go downwards.
We don't have to go down.
Yeah.
We don't. If we.
So, but by mercy of a sadhu, we can overcome. Otherwise, like a crocodile trap.
Yeah.
This.
Yeah, this hearing process has to be continuous. Can't just hear and think, well, now I know it, and I don't have to hear again. No, because the material energy is always pushing us. These two other modes are very prominent. You have to constantly hear, continuously hear.
So, on hearing this Mukundamala Stotra, it says that now I'm quite young. In Mukundamala Stotra,
Yeah.
King Kulakshetra, he prays that now I'm quite very young. He gives the example of swan entering deep into the lotus stem.
Right.
So I can remember. So what's that exactly means? Diving deep in this,
What
like a
is the
swan.
meaning of that analogy?
Yeah.
Well, the swan goes into the stems of the lotus flower and gets the essence. So going deep means to get the essence. Instead of just skimming the surface. Skimming the surface means you may hear something and it may sound in a certain way, but going deep means to absorb yourself in the process. Well, just like in the Ashtanga yoga system, there are different stages. One is dharana, dhyani, and samadhi. These are different stages of absorption. So as you go, the analogy is that he wants to go deep into the lotus feet. In other words, he wants full shelter of Krishna's lotus feet. He doesn't want to come out. He doesn't want anything else. He simply wants to go deep. And that's the nature of a swan. And a swan also has another quality, which is also similar to this point, and that is a swan, if you take water and milk and you mix them together, the swan can drink the milk from the water and leave the water. Takes the essence, or takes the, yeah. So a devotee is therefore called Hamsa, which means swan. Devotee takes the good or the essence of everything and leaves whatever else is there. Now, what is the essence? The essence of spiritual practice is to please the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That's the essence of spiritual practice. Rather than just getting the job done. Just getting the job done is getting it done. But to act in such a way that one uses their intelligence, absorption into the activity in such a way that you want to make that as an offering to the Lord. With the desire to please the Lord by that offering. Ayabilasita sunyam jnana karmananavritamana gulena Krishna silanam bhakti uttamam. So the devotee doesn't like to skim the surface. They want to go deep to the essence. Skimming the surface means just going through the motions, doing it mechanically, and seeing the activities as just material. But they're not. Every activity in devotional service is an opportunity to offer your devotion to Krishna. It's not just something we do just to get it done. Okay, does that help a little bit? Yeah, okay. Well, one more question and then maybe. Any of the ladies have questions? Oh, yeah, we have.
Hare Krishna, Maharaj.
I'm not sure. Yeah. Okay. Well,
Uh, Thank you for the class. And uh, my question is related to philosophy and practical application. And what I am facing as a challenge is that there are certain people who are very good with the philosophy. They know the ins and outs of philosophy. But when it comes to dealing with devotees and practical application, the words do not match the actions.
it means they don't know the philosophy. They memorized it. That's all. Knowing it means to carry it out. You can memorize anything. You can memorize a statement in a foreign language and to impress people who are of that same language. But that doesn't mean you know what it means. Memorization is one thing. Knowing is a complete other thing. Knowing means following. As we say, if you know what's right, do it.
So my challenge is that when I'm dealing with such people, like I'm getting affected. My consciousness, I feel, is degrading because I see the same repetitive action and I really cannot do much about it. So it's how do I protect my consciousness when I'm dealing with such people? And I really have understood that I cannot change much about it.
So you're saying you can't get away from it because it involves your required services.
Yes.
Hmm.
It's affecting me like
Well,
very deeply. Like,
well, then you have to say something. You can. Why you can't let your. If
saying
you
is also,
allow someone to do something to harm you, you're also guilty of harming yourself. That's a statement. You should never allow people to harm you. You either have to get away from that or adjust in such a way as you're not affected in that same way. Yeah, you have to do something about it. Explain that what is happening is not palatable to me, or somehow or other go to an authority in order to get things, cleared. You can't allow people to harm you and then continue to go on like that. As you say, it affects you, and if it affects you so much, you can actually get sick from that physically, because mental distress causes physical problems also. So yeah, you can't allow that to happen. You have to do something either to counteract it or to avoid it, either one, or to ameliorate it in such a way that it doesn't happen anymore. So then you have to, you might require some assistance in getting a solution. Sometimes you have to go to an authority and say, this is the situation, I can't, this is what's happening, well, please help. Or you may also approach the person who's causing you the distress and explain that this is what's happening. And ask them why they're acting like that. Why are you acting in that way? And they may be argumentative and even become defensive. But somehow or other, you have to see. Prabhupada also talks about that. He quoted a verse. It's an interesting verse. And it's like during the coronavirus, people were allowing people to harm them in the name of getting cured. And then I found this verse, and it was quoted by Srila Prabhupada. I wrote it down. I can't remember where it's from, but Prabhupada mentions that if you allow someone to do harm to you, you're also causing that. You're actually causing yourself to be harmed, because you have to stop that or avoid that somehow. And it's usually done verbally. Obviously, if it's physically, we take action when it's verbal. Sometimes we tolerate it and just go on, but sometimes we have to somehow or other solve this problem. So if you're in that environment again, and you think, oh no, here it's going to come again, so you sort of presuppose that, oh, here I go, I have to get ready to get in this negative attitude. So. But because we know the principle of Krishna consciousness is that to cause distress to anyone is an offense. So they're committing offenses. It's an offense. Body, mind, words. 3 ways you can commit offenses. So that's as much as I can say. But think about it and see there are different ways to solve the problem. You have to see what is the actual solution. But you can't let it go on. That's for sure. It says that the seniors should be very affectionate to the juniors, and the juniors should be very obedient to the seniors. That is the mood. Those who are in leadership should be very kind and affectionate to those that they're leading, and those who are following should be very obedient to them. That is the mood. That is Prabhupada's statement also. So a person in authority should not be abusive. And it is, then they don't know what it means to be in authority. Sometimes they have to correct, but it should be done in a way that people will accept, and not just, whatever way they want to do it. So Vaishnava etiquette is the ornament of a devotee. And you can read, Bhakti Churu Swami wrote a whole book on Vaishnava etiquette. And he mentions, these relationships between devotees, especially in organizational relationships based on position, service, activity, like that. Is that okay? Does that make sense? That wasn't a very enthusiastic yes. Oh, okay. Well, what were you thinking?
Authorized GBC members, or that is
Well,
true?
this is a controversial subject. I brought it up.
That's why I was thinking not to say
Very
anything.
controversial. But there's an effort right now to bring Prabhupada's books back to the way he gave them. It's being done by some of the leading devotees in our movement.
Because I see the changes. I saw the previous one and now I'm reading the new one.
Well, as corrections can be made for grammar and for spelling, but not word changes. And there's laws for that too. There are literary laws that govern the society where you can't change anything after the author has departed, and only when he's here with his permission. But there can be an antidote, what they call endnotes, where you leave the word in process and then you write some maybe explanation in a different place within the book as an endnote. That can be done because sometimes things are not clear. But you can't change the actual written words. They stay intact. Because change leads to what? Change. The more you change, the more you'll change. And then you won't be able to recognize the original after a while. So, but there's laws for that also, not just Prabhupada's instructions, but there are also laws. But this is controversial because many of the persons that did this work are very senior, and so this is now, it's being reawakened now. This is a situation now that's happening. And there's an effort to bring back Prabhupada's books in the way they were now by redoing them again with endnotes. Like that. So I'll probably get a lot of questions after this class. Maybe also get criticized for what I'm saying, but this is what I understand. Is that all right? Okay. If you want to know more, we can talk in private. Yeah, Ruchi, I think we have to make this the last question. We're getting at 9 o'clock.
Thank you, thank you for the nice class. So, like she was saying that we always have problems in authority, but I think all spiritual practice is a battle within and without. So, if we try to stop some reaction coming from somewhere by people telling us things, then it is going to come in another form. That's just my thought. And what do you have
If
to
you try
say?
to stop it, what's going to happen?
No, like, because everybody has the right to serve God in some or other way, to come to the temple and
Yeah,
serve,
that,
and
that
there
right is.
and there will always be conflicts. So a person in authority has to practice the tiksha, which is like tolerance, because all spiritual practice is a battle.
Oh, so you're giving a principle. We have to be tolerant.
No, like, isn't all any spiritual practice we take, any religion, but it's a battle within and without. Like, we have to fight within ourselves and outside forces and the
I can't get
forces.
all the words for some reason. The acoustics here, the words go up to the ceiling. If I'm sitting on the ceiling, I could hear everything you're saying. But I'm over here.
Well, I was
You
saying
know, you
that.
do. I found, and one thing I learned in this temple, I found it's easier to hear people without the microphone.
Well, I was saying that all spiritual practice
Don't use the microphone. Go ahead. Now I can hear.
all spiritual practice pertains to a battle within oneself and outside forces as well. So we cannot negate the outside forces and like.
What are those outside forces you're referring to?
Like people telling us things and putting obstacles in our way.
What did she say? Somebody's putting your obstacles in your way? Or you feel like it's like...
Like if the person in authority is like having that problem.
I'm not sure I understood the question.
It's fine.
Tolerance is understood in different ways. Tolerance doesn't mean only to accept and just let it go at that. That is a principle of tolerance, of course. And one can learn from that. But sometimes if somebody is speaking something against a philosophy or committing an offense by criticizing someone, and you become tolerant, and then you also become implicated in that offense. You either have to go away or say something. But when it comes to something coming upon you, generally we practice tolerance just to understand why is Krishna allowing this to happen to me? What can I learn from this? What can I gain from this? Yeah, there's one way of looking at it. Thank you. Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai.